My artistic labor has been divided between both working as an artist and working as a curator and an administrator, an arts facilitator, and I'd say that my background working with artist-run culture has really informed my approach to creating work and curating work. My background is predominantly in video, and I've mainly worked as a digital artist, but as of late I've been expanding more into sculpture and installation, and basically occupying the IRL, which is the in real life space, versus just a digital plane. I'm interested in the affect of queerness and how queerness can act as a sensibility, and a sensibility that can kind of be found in the mundane and the everyday. So I started working with glitch video processes towards the end of my undergrad. I became introduced to these processes actually through DIY tutorials online. And what attracted me to glitching was its potential as a kind of queer and trans medium, as it's a physical disruption and corruption of a file, and basically making the medium act in a way that it wasn't intended to behave. And I'm also really interested in it aesthetically as well. So the process that I use is data moshing or compression artifacting, and it basically involves bleeding the image from one cut to another. So when you go from one cut in a video frame to the next, it doesn't refresh, it kind of, the information bleeds through, and if you repeat this a lot, you get certain effects. So this work is called Series 1, and it's part of, I did 2 series, I'll show you Series 2 as well, but it is compiled from YouTube video that I sourced from just people's personal accounts going into the Vatican or the Louvre and taking really low-res, like handycam footage of some of the most well-known pieces of art in the Western world. And then I took this footage and I implemented this process on them, and they created these kind of moving glitch paintings. And it also got me thinking a lot about just the notion of virtual tourism in relation to art viewing, and how there's probably a much larger art audience that has seen these works through the internet rather than seeing them in real life. And I'm really interested in that, just in the value and the aura of these works and what it means to then view these works in this capacity when they've been further and further degraded through digital means. And so my interest in glitch then led me to the first exhibition that I ended up curating, which was called The Aesthetics of Failure. And this is also really tied to my interests within queer theory and the power of failure, and embracing failure as progress, and I guess the power of both failing at normativity and taking a different path. And then I created this work, which is Plant Series 1. It was curated, I created it for an exhibition that I was curated in at Interaccess, which was called There Should Be Gardens, curated by Amber Christensen. And this work was, I'd say, my most sophisticated use of the compression artifacting technique. So this was all footage shot on the Toronto Islands and at Allen Gardens. And so I was really interested in these man-made natural environments within the metropolitan Toronto core, and what that meant in terms of the definition of nature, and then also relating this definition of nature to gender normativity and heteronormativity, kind of deconstructing what that word means for something to be natural, and then using this glitch tool both as an aesthetic tool and a tool of disruption of this nature. So I'll just let this play for a few seconds. And then continuing with this idea of like deconstructing nature and also looking into popular culture. I was invited to be in this exhibition that took a critical lens to the novel The Secret Garden. And I went back and I reread the novel, and the show came about as a critique through critiquing the book through a queer lens, through a racial lens, because it's very problematic in terms of the way it deals with race and gender and a lot of identity issues. So I reread the novel through a queer lens and noticed that the word queer came up over 61 times. So I highlighted each iteration, and then I went back. There were several film iterations, but I took the bigger Hollywood film iteration and cut it up a bit, and then overlaid each quote that involved the term queer or gay, and overlaid it over the imagery. And this piece is about 30 minutes. And it was just a really interesting exercise in, I guess, seeing the intent of that word in the novel and then how I was kind of reading through the lines, but also thinking more about just the queerness that does exist in these imaginary children's fictitious worlds. And a little bit of a change of pace, but around the same time, I also came across this pioneer plaque that was sent out by NASA in the 70s. So this image was conceived of by Carl Sagan. I believe it was also illustrated by his wife, but it was sent out on 2 different Pioneer spacecrafts in '72 by NASA. And this plaque was meant to communicate really basic facts about Earth and about humanity. So all of the line diagrams and a lot of at the bottom there, that's our solar system and the position of the sun, but then you get these 2 drawings of a man and a woman, which were heavily criticized. And I was reading Fear of a Queer Planet by Michael Warner, where he highly criticizes this drawing of this man and a woman as being very white, able-bodied, heteronormative depiction of humanity. So it's very singular and conservative. Neither of them have body hair, the woman doesn't even have genitals, could go on. So I took on the task of trying to queer this image and make it into some kind of more inclusive, queer non-binary representation.
Spaceship?
I didn't think so much about the spaceship. This is the spaceship here. But I was just thinking of how to represent, I guess, a being that wasn't so exclusive. And I ended up with it. Which was kind of spawned a whole body of work, which I'll talk about, which was Furbies. But so for anyone that doesn't know, Furbies came out in the mid to late 90s, and they were a really popular children's toy. They were believed to be one of the first kind of AI toys. I don't know if they were actually AI, but they were these animatronic toys that would learn English if you interacted with them more, but they were this weird, uncanny, kind of sort of alive, covered in fake fur, but you could hear their mechanics when they moved, object. And I really liked them when I was a child. I had fond memories. I later learned that a lot of people are quite afraid of them. But I just thought of the Furby as this really strange, it's not human, it's not an animal, it's a robot, but it kind of seems sentient in some way. It's not categorized to one gender or one race, so it's just a very interesting, I guess, non-binary queer entity. So I started working more with the image of the Furby as this queer non-binary icon. And so this is an image of the original plaque. So I ended up actually reproducing the original in scale and material and getting that manufactured. And then I'm going to speak a bit about an exhibition that I curated, which is, it was called 100% Real. And so this is just a screen cap from the web portion. So basically this exhibition, it was a dual platform exhibition that was one part online, one part online URL, and then one part IRL in real life in a gallery at X Space Cultural Center. And it was part of this festival called the ROM, New Digital Art Biennial. And it's the largest digital art biennial that happens internationally. And it mostly takes place online, but for its second iteration, in which I curated this show for, they were partnering with a lot of galleries internationally to have these embassies, they called them, in real life exhibitions. And some of them were related to the online exhibitions, and some of them were their own thing. So I curated the work of 4 Toronto emerging artists that are all internet aware, working both digitally and in physical space. And this was a really interesting exhibition to curate because I was thinking through, kind of had to think through a lot of the, when you're curating digital art, and especially like net art, what is appropriate to show in the gallery and what is appropriate to show online. This is just a, so the website was up for 3 months. So it's not up anymore. It was kind of a screen grab history of what it was like to navigate the site. But yeah, really thinking through, you know, if work's made to be experienced online, there's a lot of politics around whether that should be installed in a gallery or not. I opted to have them be very separate, so the works that were meant to be in the gallery were in the gallery, the works that were meant to be online were meant to be experienced online personally. And then there were like obviously some aesthetic and conceptual ties to some of the works, but all of the artists made separate works for the website and for the gallery. And it's also interesting thinking through digital art and net art, I guess, in this way, because what's so interesting about this biennial is it works so differently than any kind of art fair or most biennials would work, in the sense that it works so outside of I guess a traditional commercial gallery context. And you know, it's like I had not a great idea of like how many people saw the work or where people were coming from when they came across the work, and it's one of those things that's once you put it online, it's kind of out there and you kind of lose that connection to it, but then it also has the power to be disseminated wider. So it's, I don't know, I haven't quite figured out how I feel about it in terms of like what it means for value with this art, but I think it's a really interesting way to experience work. And then, in my own practice, I started moving a little more towards, so I was working in video, and then was working with the Furby, decided to try some like scanning, 3D scanning, and see about working in this like digital 3D space. So this is my first attempt at scanning the first gen Furby. And then I polished it up a bit, did a little better job. Also at the same time, I was doing a residency in Windsor before I started school there, and I did this aluminum casting of like a full-size Furby and a little McDonald's Furby. And one thing I noticed that was really interesting was, so with 3D scanning, there's a lot of hiccups. It took to get, and which I'll pass around this guy, actually I can pass it around now. So this is a print that I did, which I'll discuss. But just to get, you know, the scan and then to polish off the model and then to get it in a printable format took quite a lot of labor as someone who isn't really super familiar with those processes and is probably not working with, you know, the most expensive tools. But once I cast this guy in aluminum, so the original was plastic. Well, the original was plastic and then it had like fake fur on the top, which I sprayed down. I then scanned the aluminum one and it rendered better digitally. So it was kind of like this multiple translations or iterations of one object, which I then rendered digitally and then printed, which you guys are passing around now. And then this goes into a lot of the current work I'm doing in my MFA. I've been working more with 3D printing, and then also like, so how to treat the objects. So I know it's not lit super well in here, but if you guys get a chance, the way that I've painted the object is so they appear almost like a digital effect, but in real life. Because I'm really interested now in, I guess, working physically and digitally in this way to kind of demystify the binary separation of those spaces. So those are just some multiples installed. Oh, and before I get ahead of myself, another residency I did, so jumping off like showing work digitally, another residency that I completed was one I did online last summer, and it was part of Studio Beat. which is really great. So they partner with digital artists and kind of give them a login to their website and a platform to create new work over the span of 3 weeks. So I was thinking more of this idea of digital tourism and representations of high and classical art through the internet, and combining it with some of my glitch processes. So I created this body of work. So this is a sculpture that's in Florence called Rape of the Sabine Woman. And I also created a series of GIFs on the Trevi Fountain. Sorry, they're a little bit small. But these were works that were created just meant to be displayed online. And yeah, it was a really interesting way in working as well, because very different than having an exhibition. I had no idea, even if anyone came across them or how many people came across them, but it was really interesting to have that platform to show on. And then this little aluminum guy, which I was talking about, I created my first kind of, combining a lot of the processes I've been researching, my first 3D still life piece. And in this piece, so I have the Furby and I have the Tamagotchi, and it's reading an Audre Lorde quote, which is, "The master's tools will never dismantle the master's house." And it's kind of, this piece was inspired by just the stack of books that were on my desk and some of the objects I had, and just thinking through, you know, my relationship to theory and these objects, and so I've been researching a lot, like the Furby and the Tamagotchi, and then I'll get to another object in a bit, but they fall into this category of relational artifacts. So basically they are objects that are relational in a way that they incite like emotional responses from human beings. And I'm really interested in the possibility for like emotional manipulation that these objects have, because I find they ask to be cared for and they ask to be tended to, and they require a certain kind of intimacy between human and non-human object. And I'm interested if that intimacy falls within a queer spectrum. I've also been expanding, so past the Furby and the Tamagotchi, into other characters from children's fiction that I see as these queer abject kind of characters. So SpongeBob, Tinky Winky. Both SpongeBob and Tinky Winky were actually like the source of much debate with Christian groups wanting them to be removed from television because they believed they were queer or gay. So I'm just really interested in the possibility of these non-human and like kind of gender non-binary or non-conforming characters that are in all of these children's media as a space where it's kind of okay to exist between categories. And then I'm also starting to return more to video. So recently, for the past, the Images Festival that just passed, I was commissioned by them to make a new work that responded to Deirdre Logue's body of work. So she was the spotlight artist this year. And I had to think long and hard about it because I've been a big fan of Deirdre for a long time. And I went and I watched a bunch of her work, and I used to do a little more of like performance for the camera. So I decided to go back to it. So in this video piece, which I'll show you a clip of, my partner and I are hatching a Hatchimal egg. Do any of you know what a Hatchimal is? Okay, so Hatchimals, I believe they were just released last year, but they were developed by a Toronto company. They're kind of a modern day Furby, but you have to, they come in this egg and you actually have to stroke and tap and like hold the egg for a good 1.5 to 2 hours in order for it to hatch, and it kind of responds to you, but if you put it down, it just stops. So it requires this, you know, attention for a long period of time, and then it pecks its way out of the shell, and then it kind of emerges, and then you take it out and you like cut its plastic out and it walks around. But I'm fascinated by these objects and how, I was really interested in the Furby, and then the Hatchimal came out, and it was the most popular toy this Christmas season, or one of the most. I had to wait until after Christmas to buy one. But yeah, basically this is a video where we took it out of the box, and I'm trying, I'm like stroking it and trying to hatch it, and something's wrong with it. So there's a lot of hiccups, and we end up looking up a YouTube video and figure out how to do it. But there was something really intimate about, I'm not getting audio here, but like the sound of stroking the egg, and like just this act of holding this thing that then like is birthed as this, I guess, intimacy that exists outside of heteronormative framework, but it's just this kind of different kind of intimacy that plays to what I was thinking about with these relational artifacts. Yeah, and then how that fits in terms of a queer perspective. And yeah, that's where I'm at.